I can't hear you. I don't know if your audio is connected yet or if you're muted.
It was completely muted.
Okay. Hey, what were you saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to get. So Halima is like good to go, not good to go. I mean, she's like, yeah, I'll see you at 6. But I called her and it seems like her phone's turned off. It's just kind of going straight to voicemail. And I sent her via email and Instagram the link.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard back from her, so hopefully she's looking, or she'll at least, I assume, give me a call.
Okay. So the questions are the one that I sent. The questions are the one that I sent you. The only other questions that I got one late, but it's not anything that would steer the conversation in the wrong way or pose any conflict as far as like it's not a racially cultural question. And I can talk to her when she gets on, or you can answer this for me. But I wanted to know. I had some personal type questions. So like, how did she get into therapy? As a person of color, like why was therapy as important as a field of her to even work in? Right? Not therapy, but social work or this sort of work, this line of work. Why was it important to her to work in? So if that's okay with her, and by all means, if she feels inclined to not answer any questions, that's okay too. But just we don't control. We do control who comes on this conversation, but we don't control what other questions may come on during this time. Do feel free to like say that's not something that I would feel comfortable answering, or whatever.
And I sent her that list, and she was like, yeah, these are great questions. So she's got all of those. She looked over all of them, and she loved them. So she was super excited about it. So I'm going to try. It looks like she might have set up her own Zoom. Let me try and find her.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
Also, we have no idea who's going to participate in this call, so we don't know. So our goal is to just record this call and this conversation so that we can give it back to the community. But we don't know who's going to participate. So if it's just a conversation between us, it may be. But we had people who said like, yeah, we're going to be on and we're going to call. I know Torre just asked me for the password as well. So we do have some people who I know want or said they're going to be on this call. And speaking of Torre,
hey, there he is.
But yeah, so it's going to be really, really informal, and hopefully she feels and you feel comfortable in the process.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna let me just send her one last link on a different platform and see. Try and get this link.
What's her name?
Halima.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
I was like, somebody's jumping on right now. Perfect.
Like, I'm texting you like, oh God, I'm so sorry. Okay. She made it beautiful. All right.
Yes.
How are you doing, Halima?
I'm doing okay. My last responsibility ran over, so I'll be in my car for this, but I'm here.
Most of us were in our car for our last meeting. John,
How are y'all doing?
That's great. I was like she was saying, I was in a car for our last meeting. That's my second office space uh, during this COVID period. We are great. We are so just so you know, we are making connections New Orleans. We are an organization that focuses on the mental health and well-being of African American men and boys. Um, in the St. Rock neighborhood currently, but we're actually transitioning out of that to the full city of New Orleans. And it just extended our programming to the full city of New Orleans. Um, Give me one second. Someone's asking for the password. But so our programming is community level strategies and community level work. So we're not direct to services, or we don't give therapy or host therapy sessions, but we'll do something like a masculinity talk, or we'll do something like an open mic that allows people to express themselves in whatever form or art they see fit. And we have a list of different programming, but that's what we do. I want to give this opportunity to WeHelp NOLA and Olivia to tell us a little bit about what you guys do, and then we're going to jump right into some of the questions that we have. And also, this is just a space, right? So, literally, if you feel that some of the questions are too invasive, or you don't want to answer some of the questions, you can tell us no, or give whatever reasoning you want. This is not specifically, you may not have the answers to some of the questions that our community may pose, and it's okay, right? But I want to give this opportunity to Olivia with WeHelp NOLA to explain a little bit about what that organization is and what it's doing currently in the community.
I'm here for it. Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I was like a leader, but I should run with it. Okay. Well, thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for having me on this platform. It means so much. The work that y'all do is so incredible and so incredibly important. So really, I feel honored to be in y'all's space on your platform, and just kind of sharing a little bit about what I do, and it means a lot. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having us on here and giving us the space to chat a little bit. So as most of y'all know, because I've talked with y'all about it, but WeHelp NOLA, the goal of WeHelp NOLA is to provide free mental health care to restaurant industry workers. So I myself have been in the restaurant industry here in New Orleans for over 10 years. And it being food and beverage being the second largest industry in New Orleans, most everyone has either themselves worked in service industry or knows someone closely who has themselves worked in service industry. So, it's kind of the lifeblood of New Orleans hospitality, right? So we find though that it's an industry that's a really high stress, low control job. So it's really mentally, emotionally, and physically stressful, draining, and difficult. And with that, especially in our industry here in New Orleans, you couple that with really long hours, little to no regulation, no resources, no health insurance, and you kind of have, a heavy drinking drug culture, and all that mixed together really aids to kind of the perfect storm of what can be a pretty toxic environment, especially if you don't have the resources.
1 second for me. We are trying to also stream this live on Facebook right now.
For sure.
So I just want to make sure that that's happening. Okay. Give me 1 second.
No worries.
This is a new process with our Zoom calls, is to stream them live. Let's see.
Turn that AC down. There we go.
We coming. And It's setting up the meeting. So maybe 30 seconds. Let's give it 30 seconds. And if
All
it
right.
doesn't happen in 30 seconds, it should just jump on and
Okay.
catch up with us. Okay.
All right. You keep me posted.
And we are live. There it is. Perfect.
All right, perfect. So just to continue on a little bit about WeHelp NOLA, especially now since we're live, we were just talking a little bit about our restaurant industry here in New Orleans, as WeHelp NOLA does provide free mental health resources to restaurant industry workers, core of that being psychotherapy. But as I'll talk a little bit about, there's a whole nother kind of plethora of wellness services available as well. But yeah, we were kind of getting into the bulk of the industry here, and that kind of systemic, those toxic and systemic failures that we see in the industry every day here. So just it being such an emotionally, mentally, and physically draining profession, coupled with a heavy drinking drug culture, no health insurance. Most restaurants here don't provide any type of resources, including health insurance, which is such a biggie. And all of that really leads to kind of the perfect storm to be a really toxic environment. So I myself struggling with those issues, being a service industry member for over 10 years and needing those resources and struggling to find them, and seeing so many of my fellow, staff members, friends, family in the industry suffer from a lot of those issues and not have the resources was something I wanted to change. And so that's kind of how WeHelp NOLA was born. I'd like to also touch on, even the very few restaurants that do offer health insurance, that's something where you're still paying out of pocket for that insurance. Insurance, obviously, our healthcare system is garbage. So it's still very expensive. You're still paying for that out of pocket. And even with the restaurants that do offer health insurance and those who are able to afford that health insurance, which is not a lot of us, you're still dealing with co-pays, and that's if you can find an in-network provider, if you can do so, that's accepting new clients, that you can do so within a short amount of time, and then you're still paying out of pocket for co-pay. So, I think what's important for a lot of employers as well to realize is that they may think, oh, well, I offer health insurance, so I've done all I can do. But realistically, that's still a major roadblock that a lot of people still aren't going to seek care because they're still paying out of pocket, and still really difficult, expensive, and time consuming to do so. So a lot of people don't seek that care regardless. And that's for the very few amount that do offer it. So with WeHelp NOLA, I wanted to eliminate the cost and aid to convenience. So those are the two major things. So we wanted to make it free to the client, and we wanted to make it as convenient as possible. So what we do is we essentially work with restaurants in the city, and they partner with us and pay a monthly membership to us. That monthly membership is extremely low cost, depending on kind of how many staff are in that restaurant. But that responsibility does fall on the employer, as I think we all can agree it should, for their employees, but very low cost. So they're able to do that. Even for a small business, they're still able to do those monthly memberships. And through that membership, all of their staff has free use of all of our services. So that's all of our therapy. And we as well partner with local businesses, studios, all throughout the city to offer, kind of another range of wellness services outside therapy. So we do, free yoga classes. We partner with Magnolia Yoga, Free to Be Yoga, to offer discounted and free classes. We partner with Dancing Grounds for free dance classes, Meditate New Orleans and for their meditation. So kind of outside of therapy, especially for people who might not be super comfortable with therapy right off the bat, or at least just want to use some kind of wellness service that, even if it's a physical or emotional service, is still going to benefit them and their mental health no matter what. We do also offer those as well. And partner with Dancing Grounds for free dance classes, Meditate New Orleans and for their meditation. Sorry, that's so weird. It's like replaying what I was saying back to me. Sorry, that was wild. Okay, it stopped. That was trippy. Okay. But yeah, so that's a little piece of what we do. So we partner with the restaurants. Staff gets to use all of our services free of charge. We have a group of clinicians, Halima, who's on the call right now, being one of our new WeHelp NOLA clinicians, who generally, most of them have their own private practice, but they give sessions to WeHelp NOLA at a sliding scale or a lower cost, so that we are able to give those monthly memberships to restaurants at such a low cost that they're able to do it. We're able to compensate them, and then the client gets to use all the services free of charge. So it's a little bit kind of into the delicate balance of how we operate. But yeah, and that's kind of the core of our services, as well as highlighting local businesses and working with them to kind of show the work that they do, support it, get as many people as we can into those places that we love, that are big wellness leaders within New Orleans. And yeah, so that's essentially what we do in the work with restaurants that we do. I have been talking with John and Kalila about also kind of, we've branched out a little bit as well since COVID, because when COVID hit, obviously that was a huge block and huge stressor for restaurants. And we wanted to make sure that we kind of switch gears and make sure that any restaurant who maybe couldn't stay open, who didn't have the funds to be able to pay, anything to us, was still able to keep those services for their staff members, and then also to branch out and, regardless of our restaurant partnerships, offer that therapy to all restaurant industry that was affected by COVID-19, because most everyone lost their job. I mean, everyone did. Some were still able to do some to-go or whatnot in their restaurant, but we wanted to make sure that we were actively offering services to the community, especially in need at a time like this. So we actually started back in May, free therapy for all service industry affected by COVID-19, regardless of WeHelp membership. So that way, any restaurant that wasn't able to pay could still be involved. Any staff member who is no longer employed by said restaurant still could use services. And then also anyone else who was in need, who wanted to get those mental health resources could, regardless of being a previous WeHelp member. So we've been doing that month to month and extending it. We're still doing it for July. And that's definitely a resource that we want to extend to as many people as we possibly can. We do that through donations and fundraising and things of that nature. So the number can vary month to month on how many we can offer, kind of based on what the donations we get and things of that nature. But generally, we've been able to do it every month, anywhere from like 18 to 30 sessions that are open a month for all service industry, outside of our restaurant partnerships. And we're going to be continuing that on monthly. So that's a really cool resource that we have to service industry kind of across the board as well, that I definitely wanted, in talking with John and Kalila, to make sure people knew about, and that it was open and there and available. And in kind of talking about the convenience factor, WeHelp, it's a super easy sign up. Go onto our website. You're able to see all of our clinicians' bios, pics, information, things they maybe want to highlight that they specialize in. And you're able to see all of that, so you're not kind of totally shooting in the dark. And because, again, therapy can be, that first time can be awkward. It can be uncomfortable. You're getting to know someone. So we want to try and at least kind of ease in as much as possible. So you're able to see all of that, go onto our calendar, see what's open. You can filter by time, date, clinician, whatever, and sign up. And it's just it's basic information. And then it follows up with the clinician for more. But yeah, and it's a really, really simple process. So we urge anyone in need of those resources to use them. They're available on our website as of right now. And we'll keep running that free therapy as long as we possibly can with all the funds and donations that we get. But as of right now, they're open, they're live. So by all means, please use them. We're here for y'all. So yeah.
So can you tell us how to get access to it? So just where do we go to get access to it, or just to support you guys, or support the work, or find out more about you guys, whether it be social media or website? Like, how do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, of course. So if you're looking for the free therapy, all you have to do is go to our website, WeHelpNOLA.com. there's a little top page under our different pages of booking. You simply hit that, you'll go, it'll show you a calendar of all of our sessions that we have open. It will show you all of our clinicians' bios, pictures, things of that nature, and you're able to just book. You just put your name, your email, phone number, just basic contact information, and then you're able to book that therapy session. There's a drop-down list where if you are a restaurant member, you'd list your restaurant, but if you're doing it outside of a restaurant partnership and you're just taking advantage of our free therapy, all you have to do is hit other, and that's it, and we'll know that you're one of those people using that free therapy. So that's right on our website right now. All you have to do, easy sign up, boom, and sign up with whatever clinician you'd like at whatever time you'd like. Just a reminder, it is all teletherapy at this point, so it will be on a virtual platform of whatever the clinician's choosing is. But so it won't be in person, and we're in no hurry to do that to keep everyone safe. So it is teletherapy. In terms of the work we do, if you want to learn more, WeHelpNOLA.com is our website. Our Facebook is WeHelpNOLA, and our Instagram, which is probably, Instagram's great. It's a good up-to-date platform of all the things that we're doing, is WeHelpNOLA as well. So you can get information there. If anyone has more in-depth questions, you can feel free to email me. My name's Olivia, Olivia, at WeHelpNOLA.com. And those resources are on the website too. So if you forget my name or whatever, or you decide you have a question that pops up, it's all on there.
Can you throw it in the chat as well? Throw it in a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking, if you or anyone you know is interested in donating, or wants to have that information of how to donate, in our bio and our Instagram, that link will take you directly to our fundraising campaign. Just $30 is will fund a free therapy session to someone in need. So you're able to give as much or as little as you want, but it's really cool to kind of see, $30 opens up a free therapy session. So, that's a really cool way to think about it. You're like, hey, I've got an extra $30, I'm gonna throw it in, and that will give therapy to, one session to someone who really needs it. So that is all in our Instagram. Right in the bio, and it's all there. But by all means, if anyone has questions, you can DM our Instagram, you can email me, whatever, we're there.
Perfect. So Halima, and let's make sure I'm saying your name right. Is it pronounced Halima?
Yes.
Cool. So we gonna get into some of the questions, okay? And before, let me get comfortable, right? Because therapy, I feel like you should be your most comfortable self. So I had to turn my head around. That's my most comfortable self. So first, I do want to ask, why was therapy or why was the field that you're in right now important to you? And can you give us like what this field even means, right?
Okay. Therapy was or is important to me because I had the experience of not having someone that I could talk to when I was younger, and I understood how important that was. And that's kind of what attracted me to being a counselor or being a therapist. Therapy itself is just a process that allows someone to be able to, like you said, be their most authentic selves and just talk about whatever it is that they're dealing with. So whether it is something like a serious mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, or if it's just life issues, you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you're trying to find a new job, anything like that. Therapy is a place where you can.
You froze for a moment. Let's see if we can wait a second to see if she unfreezes. It was just about to get good too. Okay, if it doesn't come back, I'm thinking she's gonna jump out and jump right back on. So we'll just give her a second for that. Um, During that time, I do want to ask you, Olivia, in seeking to start this organization, how did you figure um, that going through the service industry to provide specifically these services was the best roadmap, right? So like, and I understand maybe because you know that industry or because of your background, you understood that industry. But did you feel like that was the industry with the largest need as well?
I think it's a little bit of both. So I think, yay, she's back.
We coming right back to you.
I think it was both. I think in pulling from my own experiences, my own, struggles with mental health, and that being the profession I was in and needing those resources and not having them. So assessing that need, just on a personal level, and also with those I worked with, and also seeing a lot of people go down pretty dark paths because again, those resources weren't there, and the kind of the nature of the beast that the industry is. That was a big part of it. So I wanted to, the industry is my family, right? So I wanted to support my family. I wanted to go to the people, like you said, assessing need, right? So the industry definitely is one where a lot of times it's going to be a part-time job, or it's going to be a job with little to no regulation. So there's going to be little resources offered, whereas a lot of other major industries, health insurance, benefits, those are a big part of the jobs. But this is an unsalaried, it's an hourly position, and one that most employers will take advantage of pretty majorly and wildly. So it's one where you're not going to find those resources, you're not going to find those benefits, you're not going to find any of that. So definitely I saw a need for it within myself and with all of the rest of my industry family. And I wanted to help that. And then also, just the industry itself kind of, it breeds the need for that kind of work. And that kind of help. So that's kind of where I went. I went to where I knew, and also, I would love to be doing this with all industries and across the board. But again, that's a big feat, right? I can't kind of rework the healthcare system as it is and as is right now. So I work where I know and with the people, the industry that I know and that I've been a part with. And then from there, try to get to a place where we can start expanding and going forward to other people without those resources, other hourly workers, sex workers, everything else that kind of deal with those same struggles. But it's kind of a starting small to be able to expand because it's a delicate process. So I think that's why I originally had just kind of owned in on just the service industry itself. But it's definitely something I would love to, in the future, continue to expand to all of the industries that desperately need those resources.
Thank you. Thank you. Halima, so we gonna dive back into that question. And
Yeah.
so if you need to, like if you're having connectivity issues, anything like that, and you would prefer to call in, if you private message me or DM your phone number, I'll send you the link with all the information if you want to just call in too. But no pressure, just if you have to or need to. Okay.
I'll do that to be safe.
Okay.
But what it was is my phone overheated, so it kind of shut down for a second.
No problem. So the question was along the lines of like, how did you get specifically how did you get into this field, and what does therapy even look like?
So I believe I answered how I got into the field and then a little bit about what therapy looks like. But I think one of the main takeaways for what therapy looks like is that you're not getting advice. So you're not going to sit down and someone is going to give you the answers to all of your problems. And I think that's really important for people to know, because when you go in with that mindset, you can easily feel disappointed in what you actually get. But what you get is a sounding board. So you get to talk about whatever you're dealing with to someone who is trained in hearing what you're saying and helping you to learn the skills to deal with your problems yourself, as opposed to just getting advice from someone.
Dope. Dope. Okay, so we did get some questions from the community to ask as well. So we're gonna pose those to you. The first question was how to forgive huge grievances. And the reason why I turn my hat around is because I am a purveyor of holding on to stuff, right? And I feel like I'm in therapy right now, so I'm gonna be honest, right? I am good at holding grudges, right? But how do you forgive when you feel like this thing is something big or it's this large grievance that I received?
So for questions like this, there is no like soundbite answer. It's really a process. You know, a lot of times people have difficulty forgiving because of some kind of emotional trauma, or even it doesn't even necessarily have to be trauma, but some kind of emotional baggage that they have, that puts them in a position to hold grudges, and not be able to accept or express forgiveness to others. So it's definitely a process, and a lot of it starts with your own internal work. So forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you being able to accept whatever it is that has been said to you or done to you. And that is a lot of personal work, as opposed to I want to learn how to be friends with this person again because they hurt me. It's more of, well, what about me do I need to adjust or deal with that's going to allow me to accept this person that's hurt me for whoever they are, if that makes sense.
Definitely. So correct me if I'm wrong, and just to elaborate, this is
Mm-hmm.
more of like a you thing, right? Like if I'm the person that's coming to therapy to find or seek answers about anything, I have to learn how I can make whatever adjustments to, understand or forgive or to whatever. But it's all about what I can control in those moments, right?
Right.
Okay. And also tell me if I'm wrong, because I do not know the answers, right? And also, what do you say to people that go into therapy expecting the answers? And I know you kind of touched on this a little bit before, but a lot of times people go specifically expecting this person to have the answers to life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you like as a therapist? What do you say to that?
So, it's funny because therapy is also a model for how we interact with people, like the relationships that we have with people. And by that, I mean, we often go into relationships with expectations of what the other person is supposed to bring or do or say, um, as opposed to just letting them reveal who they are. So for someone who comes into therapy and, they have that expectation of, I want you to fix this. I want you to tell me what I need to do right now. I mean, the style of therapy that I engage in is very honest and direct. And I think for this instance, a lot of therapists are the same way. It's just the communication that either one will question, why do you feel like you need? Why do you feel like you need the advice? And kind of go that route, or is just simply communicating, well, that's not what this relationship is. And if you're willing to remove those expectations, then we can move forward. But if you're not, the process is going to be very difficult for you, because it can be very frustrating when you say, I had a fight with my girlfriend and I just don't know what to do. And the person you're paying, or your person you're going to for professional opinion, just says, well, tell me more about that, or tell me why you don't want to fight with your partner anymore. So it can just be very frustrating when you're looking for an answer, but that's just not how the process works.
I'll tell you one, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, but thank you also for even saying or calling it a professional opinion, right? Um, it's that's one of the first times I heard it in that way or spoke to in that way. But it shows that this is not the answer, right? This is literally and exactly what you said it was, which is a professional opinion. So someone, I guess they're from California, but they asked how to find a Black female therapist in Southern California. So I don't know if there's a network that exists, right? Actually, I do, but I want I'm asking if how do you respond to that?
So I would say there are two avenues that I could think of immediately, and that would be Therapy for Black Girls, which is a website founded by a psychotherapist, Dr. Joy Bradford, and it is a directory of Black female therapists. So basically exactly what this person is looking for. That's Therapy for Black Girls. They have a podcast, they have an Instagram, they have a website, and you can find a therapist on any of those avenues. And then also Psychology Today, which is more of a broad directory. So they have all different ethnicities and backgrounds, but you can specify exactly what you're looking for.
Perfect.
Psychology Today, not sociology.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All good.
And the next question that I have for you is, do you really feel that I need therapy, right? Are the issues that I have, can they really be solved by you or me simply being more vocal about any issues that I may have, right? So I'm speaking from that person's perspective.
I think I need a little clarification, because if they're speaking from their own perspective, I don't know if they need therapy. Are they saying like, how do we know when a person needs therapy?
Yeah. So I'm quoting the community, right?
Right. Right.
So it's in however you feel comfortable to respond, because me fixing it is literally me adding my own words to it, which I'm trying not to do as much as possible. But the question in how I encompass it is like at this point, like how do you understand that I may need therapy, or this may be something that I need to actually talk to someone about? And especially as a person who deals or lives in a cycle of people who, like my family, a lot of the trials and traumas that I have, they have as well, right? So how do I know that this is something that I need therapy for, or maybe traumatic, or maybe something that I need to talk to someone about? And how do I like figure that out? Like if this is worth therapy or
not? One of the signs, or one of the major points where I would say someone should seek professional help is when the issue starts to impact different areas of their lives. So let's say, for instance, if you have trouble sleeping, right? If you have trouble sleeping one night, you have trouble sleeping. But if you have trouble sleeping every night and it starts to make you late for work and it starts to make you grumpy, so you argue with your girlfriend or boyfriend, that's a sign that you should see a doctor, right? So it's very similar to psychological or emotional or social issues if you have difficulty with crowds, right? So it's one thing to have difficulty with crowds, but if you have difficulty with large crowds and you can't go to the supermarket or grocery store, sorry, that's my New York coming out. You can't go to the grocery store, or you can't go to concerts, and you can't even maybe sit in a classroom of 25 people. That tells you that it's an issue. It's a larger issue that you may need professional help with, because it's impacting your daily life in a way that is creating more issues for you.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep going. If you
can we ask a question from the live, John?
Sure, give me 1 second.
I put it in the chat.
I got you. Okay. What is the process of becoming a therapist?
So it's pretty streamlined from state to state. There are some smaller differences, but basically you need a bachelor's degree. You need, now the bachelor's degree, depending on your master's program, could be in a variety of fields, but for the most part, it should be in like psychology, sociology, counseling, something of that nature. And then a master's degree in school counseling, community counseling, marriage and family therapy, any of those areas, and then your state licensure, and you can become a counselor or a therapist.
Thank you. So if you wanted to do individual and couples therapy, which one should you start first?
So that's a little tricky. I would definitely say it's a personal preference. Again, that's the counselor in me. There is no correct answer. It's about what you feel is best. Whatever issues are most pressing and are, if your relationship issues are impacting how you feel about yourself, maybe consider going to couples counseling first. If your personal issues are impacting your relationship, maybe consider going to individual counseling. And you could also go to both of them at the same time. But I understand that financially and time-wise, that's not feasible for everyone.
During this time, it just made me think of another question, if it's okay. Olivia, do you guys offer couples therapy as a resource as well?
Love that you asked this, because someone actually reached out to me today with the exact same question. So that was a question we hadn't had before. And I had let that person know, and it was great because it gave me a moment to kind of think about it and think about, going down that avenue for the future. So as of right now, technically we don't quote unquote offer couples therapy. We just offer one-on-one private therapy. That being said, a lot of the therapists that work for WeHelp do conduct couples therapy in their own private practice. And that's something that I'm definitely 100% open to coming to the clinicians, asking if that's something they're comfortable about, and kind of working that out with them. Especially as of right now, because we're running that free therapy, that's a much more doable thing for us. If we go back to a strictly restaurant only situation, it'd be something. I never like to say no to someone who's in need of care ever. So I always try to make it work. If it's a situation where one person's in the service industry and the other one isn't, it's not technically something that we kind of advertise that we offer, but I'm willing to make it work, right? So if that's something that the clinician's willing to do, that the client is really in need of, and we can definitely, can make that work and make it happen, I'm super open to it. So while it's not necessarily what we offer, on a case-by-case basis, I'm definitely open to offering that to those who need it, if the clinician's willing as well.
I have a follow-up question too, John. I'm sorry.
I see it.
No, I have one that I didn't type in the box.
Oh, okay.
So going back to the couple and individual therapy, is it okay, or should, say I'm going to individual therapy, is it okay for me and my partner to also seek therapy from the same therapist as a couple as well, or should it be a separate situation?
From a ethical perspective, it's probably better if they're separate therapists, just because it's not that professionally, it's not impossible to separate between the individual and the couple, but it can appear one-sided to the other spouse who's not in counseling.
Okay. So I have a question along those lines, right? How does a therapist, as a therapist, how do you give therapy, right? While understanding bias, right? So like understanding that like as people, we come with biases or beliefs or like, how do you push those things to the side to or you know to give service?
Hmm. So we, in our master's programs, we are trained in something called cultural competency. And that is basically just understanding that people are different and they have different backgrounds, and learning how to operate with individuals who we might not necessarily relate to. Um, I think that as human beings, of course, people come with their own biases, but um, if if you have certain biases, you shouldn't be in the field, and that's just personal opinion, really.
So we got another question from the live. So I'm gonna try to, as the live questions come, I'm gonna try to answer those, or just ask those as they come, just because they're here. Um, do therapists get offended if you stop coming to therapy?
The short answer is no, because it's just like if you have a doctor and you don't go to your follow-up visits. It's nothing that we can take personally. The professional is separate from the personal. So getting offended is a personal response, and that doesn't that's just not how we operate in a professional sense. So if someone decides not to come anymore, then they have their reasons for not doing so. And as a therapist or a counselor, those are things to be mindful of.
Thank you. If or do you are you a part of or attending therapy yourself?
We are all encouraged, we meaning, therapists, counselors, we're all encouraged to go to counseling during our master's program and, really after. I am not in counseling right now, but I probably, I should be, and we're all encouraged. Like I said, we're all encouraged to do
that. The next question is, why is working through better than avoiding?
So of course, avoiding is easier, right? You just push the thing off to the side that's bothering you. But working through allows you to break that. If we think about it as like a boulder, you pushing the boulder to a side is a lot easier than hammering through the boulder to break it into pieces. And that's kind of the difference between avoiding and working through. Working through allows you to understand the why. So instead of just, if you're someone who feels sad all the time, instead of just every time you feel sad, you listen to music, right? You're never dealing with why you're sad. You're just doing something to cope with being sad, which is okay. But if that's all you do, you're always going to be sad. As opposed to working through, you find out the reason why you're sad. And then once you find out why you're sad, you can kind of, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, you have some control there because you know the reason why.
Mm-hmm. This is getting good. This is great. This is great. Are there any shortcuts to that work? And this is one of my favorite questions, right? And the reason why it's one of my favorite questions is because, one, we're always looking for like the microwavable version of something, right? In this moment, it happens to be therapy. And to me, as somebody who goes to therapy or somebody that has been a part of therapy, it's sometimes taxing as well, right? Like to understand that we have the injustices that are going on right now. We have coronavirus that's going on right now. We have bills and regular things that we're doing. What's the shortcut? What's the quick answer? I know the full session is an hour. but give me 10 minutes. So what's your answer to, is there a shortcut?
The short answer is no. There is no shortcut that will produce the same results that going to therapy will. There will be kind of like avoiding there or learning coping skills. Those things help now and then, and they help sometimes, and you know, it can get you through the day, through the week, even the month. But nothing helps the problem better than doing the work and finding the source.
Mm.
But
Oh, yeah. Come on.
no, I just said it's funny. This question, your answer reminded me when you said there's no shortcut. I had a therapist that used to be like, you know, avoiding those things and taking those shortcuts. It's like the fad diet, right? It's like, sure, you can lose weight super quick. You do nothing, drink, you know, lemon water, cayenne pepper, whatever. You don't eat for 2 weeks. Yeah, you'll lose a ton of weight real quick. You'll feel better right away. But it's all going to come back, if not more, right? So like avoiding those issues, pushing them away, it'll help in the short term. You might feel better in that immediate moment, but it's all going to come back, and it's all going to snowball and be even worse the second time around. So that's exactly what that reminded me of. And yeah, I definitely agree.
And I've heard a couple people ask for the shortcut, but they also ask for the cure, right? So like, when am I better? Like, how do I, when is this therapy done, right? Like, is this, I'm gonna just go to therapy from week 1 to week 4, and then I know after week 4 I'll be great. So how do you tell people, or like, what is the ending or the end result, or what you're looking for to even know this is working, right?
So yeah, therapy is definitely, now there's something called like maintenance therapy, right? So this is maybe after that major issue has been resolved, you can continue therapy just for, you know, day-to-day issues. That's a personal preference. That's a privilege financially also. But for the most part, there is an end to therapy. And that end is kind of like when that question of, how do I know I need therapy? It directly relates to how you know when you have successfully completed therapy. So that same issue that you had going in, when it no longer has that impact on the other aspects of your life, and when you have self-awareness of whatever the issue is, and you have learned the skills to deal with that issue. Now, it's important to say that successful therapy doesn't always include the cure, like you mentioned, right? So you could have successful therapy and still have depression. You could have successful therapy and still have social anxiety. Successful therapy doesn't necessarily mean that all of that goes away. It means that you've learned how to deal with it and how to cope effectively and in a healthy way. And you've also learned, you know, how to identify your symptoms and your triggers and things like that.
Perfect. We have another question in the chat. I see Olivia. You what's going on?
Well, no, I was thinking on that too, because I know myself personally, like there have been times where I have been seeing a therapist consistently. I went in at a certain time in my life, worked through a lot of those issues, felt like I came to a point where I was okay, you know, enough to continue on and either see them much less or, you know, not need to see them at all. And then, you know, it's important to remember life is life and traumas can pop up at any point. So, you know, you may work through one issue and go on, and then something else, you know, another trauma can come up or another issue, and you may have to go back and unpack, you know, different baggage that maybe you didn't even do the first time, or that's still an issue. And that's definitely happened to me in the past, as well as, you know, kind of leaving and being, I wouldn't say cured, but good in my space, and then having to go back because something has changed or something traumatic went on, and you kind of need to handle it. So yeah, it's always evolving, right?
Yeah.
One of the questions in the chat was, how much is too much to pay for therapy?
That is, I would say, relative. I will say therapy can range on the lower end. Let's take the cost of WeHelp. Let's say $30. And being mindful that that's on the extremely low end. That's more like a master's student who hasn't completed their training yet, but they need hours. So $30, and then some people charge upward of $200+ per session for an individual session, and that is based on their training, if they have specializations, the location, the need. Um, so yeah, those are a few different things that go into the price of counseling, and it can definitely vary.
Hmm. Is there what do I look for in a therapist, right? Like even in based on my experiences, so like understanding that there's different education levels or different certifications that a therapist or your clinician that you're looking for may have. How do I find out exactly which one of those things I may be in a need for?
So as I mentioned, every therapist has in order to be a counselor or a therapist, you have to have a master's degree. So right, that comes with the territory. I would look at, and again, all of these things are relative because there are some counselors who are really good and they don't have as much experience. There are some that have a lot of experience, but they won't be what you need. But some things to look at are their experience level, meaning how many years they've been practicing, and their type of certifications. So licensed professional counselor is kind of the standard as far as I've been practicing for at least 2 years, postmasters. So this shows that I can legally practice on my own. So you want to look for that. So that's LPC. PLPC, which is a provisional licensed professional counselor. Those are people who may have graduated from their master's program, but they haven't completed those 2 years postmasters. And then the certifications you would look at, so maybe are they nationally certified? And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that they will be better. It's just something that you can have in addition to your licensure. But specializations will tell you if someone is right for you, and that maybe if you are someone who struggles with trauma, maybe you want to work with someone who has a background in cognitive behavioral therapy, or trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, it turns into alphabet soup and it can get very complex. But I would definitely say look for the years of training and at least whether they're licensed or not.
Thank you. Is there a skill, lesson, thought process that stands out as being the most helpful? Could be impact or could be number of people it helps. But is there one of those things that you've noticed as a therapist, this lesson or this skill or this thought process stands out as being the most helpful?
That's very difficult to answer. But I will say that what I just mentioned, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is one of the largest research-based methods of counseling. So there is a lot of proof or research that it works. And cognitive behavioral therapy works on helping people to identify the connection between their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions, right? So if you have a thought, that thought produces a feeling, and that feeling makes you act. Once you realize that connection, that is intended to be able to improve interactions and behaviors. So let's take anger, for instance. So someone can come into therapy and just feel like, I get angry all the time and I don't know why. I'm just angry. But when you get into it a little bit, so there's a stimulus, right? There is something that happens, some kind of stimulus that happens that evokes a thought. Somebody steps on your shoe, right? When someone steps on your shoe, your thought could either be, why in the world would this person step on my shoe? Or it could be, oh, that was an accident, right? Both of those thoughts evoke a different feeling. So if you think, why did they step on my shoe? That makes you angry, because why would they do that? Or confused. If you think, oh, it was an accident, then you are more forgiving. And then, so that forgiving feeling makes you say, it's okay, right? The action is then, it was an accident, it's okay, don't worry about it. But that feeling of anger will then make you say, what the hell are you doing? Sorry, I hope that's okay. Or
Yeah,
I want to
say
fight.
whatever you want. This is fine. We in therapy.
Okay.
We good.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully, I know that might have been a lot to digest, but that's basically, that's what it is.
Okay. I got another question from the chat. It was, if I were the one seeking therapy, I would ask, what was your theory that you ascribe to, or and which techniques? So to me, I honestly don't know what that means. So if you can give us a little background on even the meaning of that question a little bit, so that like anybody who may just be coming in may not understand it like I do, or don't. Can you explain what that means?
So the theory, when the person asks the theory that I ascribe to, when you're in training to become a counselor, there are a few different theoretical frameworks or theoretical modalities. And what that means is you have options to choose how you want to practice therapy. So okay. So if you're someone, so there are a few different ones. So you could operate from solution focus. That means you don't necessarily care about the why. You operate in a way that just helps the client find solutions to their problems. As opposed to Adlerian. So Adler was a theorist. I know I was getting like really into it, but Adler was a theorist, right? And his perspective is that your childhood and your upbringing impact the person that you are today. So those are different examples of different theories. So if you go to someone who's solution focused, they're not going to ask many questions about your childhood and why you do the things that you do. It's more so going to be, okay, you have this problem. Let's talk about solutions to it. Now, they're not going to tell you the solutions, but you'll be working together to find the solutions. If you go to someone like me, who's more Adlerian, I think that, or I think that your childhood, your upbringing has an impact on who you are, which plays into why you have the problems that you have. So we will definitely explore more of your, upbringing as opposed to someone who is solution focused.
Man, that's a great question. So, uh, as someone with a wealth of knowledge, how do you what questions do you have for a therapist, right? So like switch roles with me, and what are questions that we should be asking, right? So like this is from a community that has a different range and different levels of knowledge of therapy, of services, or whatever, right? But using your knowledge, your background, what are some of the questions that our community should be asking when seeking therapy?
That's a tough question for me, and it's funny because now I kind of want to explore why that's a hard question for me, because I'm not sure why it's hard. But I would definitely say you want to know their level of experience. So how many years have they been a counselor? what perspective do they operate from? So just similar to the question that was asked. Those would be the top two, which is, the question you just asked, and then the previous question about how to select a therapist. They're very similar, and they would have, I guess, very similar answers, and that would be, you want to know how long they've been practicing, what perspective they operate from, like how do they see counseling, because you might be someone who you need a more aggressive therapist. There are types of therapy that are a bit more aggressive than others. So you want to know, how that potential therapist operates, and how long they've been operating that way.
Perfect. I got another question for you. So let's actually start now, because we got at least 40 more questions to go. No, I'm kidding. So the next question was, if something happened in your personal life, so in your life, right? If something happened in your personal life that was traumatic, where you could no longer give services to the clients that you had, how would you go about addressing that with your clients, and how would you end the therapeutic relationship?
There's actually, well, I guess so you can either include that type of thing in your intake paperwork. So it could be actually like spelled out, if I were to have an emergency, this is what needs to happen. And we're also trained on discontinuing the therapeutic relationship. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So how I personally, let's say for instance, the type of therapist that I am, I'm very direct. So if there was some type of event, I would express to the client the event that has happened, and then I would talk about referring them to someone who can see them, because I can no longer see them. And do understand that a lot goes into making that decision, because as a counselor, we understand, once you've built up a relationship with a therapist, it is very difficult to switch and to just start going to someone else. So if something like that happens with a counselor or a therapist of yours, they have your best interest at heart, because we do understand how important it is, how important continuity is. But it would definitely just be, expressing what happened, telling the client that, you have to refer them out. And now this shouldn't happen in like one session. There should at least be 2 sessions to prepare for that transition. But emergencies do occur, especially now in the time of COVID. I mean, anything can happen. And so it can be kind of like I show up and this is the last session. But by all means, if that ever happens, then you should know that this was an extreme circumstance, because ethically, that is not appropriate. So if it does happen, that means it has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Touch on that real quick too.
Yeah, of course.
Halima made excellent points with that, and I think it's always different when it's emergency based. But like we even went through similar things with WeHelp. I've had clinicians that went on maternity leave and things of that nature, where there's obviously more heads up there. But a good thing to remember too, as a client, is that at least for us, for those people that were seeing a certain clinician, had a really good relationship, and then that clinician's going to be gone for a people amount of time, they were able to they were able to let the clinician know, hey, because most clinicians are going to be either taking notes or have doing work, and Halima obviously can speak more to this because she's actually of that profession, but having a background on the client, that as long as the client is comfortable, they can then share with another clinician. So that was really helpful for some of our clinicians who had to leave for a certain amount of time for maternity leave or other reasons. Like, hey, I would love for you to share that info with the next person you refer me to, which also makes it a little bit easier, because you don't feel like you have to unpack quite as much and start all over if someone has a little bit bit of background. And that's obviously, when it's more planned, that's easier, but that's always good to remember too, like even in an emergency setting, you know, asking the one you currently have a relationship with to maybe share that info with the future one, so that you don't feel like that daunting of notion of, oh God, I got to start all over from the beginning.
Thank you. Halima, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, in these situations, I mean, well, in therapy, right? You touched a little bit on cultural competency, and speaking from New Orleans, right? So I tell people all the time, New Orleans is unlike any other place I've ever been, right? And it's mostly because I can drink whenever I want. But other than that, like, how does cultural competency translate biases, but also like geographical location and what comes along with that? Like, is how, like, even how we express grief, for instance, like we'll go in second line in the street versus, like, other cultures or other places around the nation. So, like, how do those things transcend within your work?
Let me know if I'm not exactly answering the question. So I think I might need a condensed version of the question.
Sure, I can condense it too, because
Okay.
my question is literally you. So you mentioned your New York was coming out, right?
Mhm.
Cool. Being from New York, how does your work translate to patients who may not understand where you guys may not meet on the same lines of communication, whether it be just because you're from New York, or whether it be just because our actual cultural experiences and the way we deal with grief, or the way we deal with depression or anxiety or whatever they may be. Like, how did that fall into your work? I'm sorry if that wasn't condensed.
It was at first, and then you kind of, but it's okay. I think I got it better. So there is a professional persona that you kind of start off with, right? And that is just to be to have this what we call unconditional positive regard, and to be culturally competent means that the client is the expert on their lives, right? They know their lives best. And I think, but what I think you're kind of going into is then maybe is the fact that I'm from New York, and that gives me a certain, I guess, lens on life. Are you saying, like, how does that impact my work with the client who was from New Orleans?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's exactly what.
Okay, so that's where the professional persona comes in, and then the cultural competency. So the professional persona kind of pushes to the side my New York demeanor and vernacular and things like that. So when I present to a client, that's kind of put to the side. That definitely plays a part in how I personally view the world. But again, my professional persona is separate from that. Now, if I have a client who, from New Orleans, born and raised, cultural competency would mean that, well, actually, I'll use New Orleans can work. So cultural competency would mean that if they come in and they start talking about second lines and other pieces of the New Orleans culture, I'm trying to think of something specific to New Orleans culture that will help me make my point. Let's go with maybe someone who was of Hispanic descent, or right, and they a large part of their spirituality can include communicating with spirits in some form or fashion, right? So if you have a client who comes in and they talk about their grandmother who was talking to some spirits, or that's something that they learned to do, cultural competency would be not hearing that and say, okay, this client is psychotic. cultural competency would be hearing that and understanding that it's a part of who they are, if that makes sense. Or maybe for like, you know, if you have someone who lives in a house with 10 people, they live in a 1 or 2 bedroom with 10 people, cultural competency would be not assuming that they are poor, or that there are certain circumstances. Cultural competency, if they were, you know, Asian, that might be a way to save money. If they were of Hispanic descent, you know, it's part of their culture. So not, I'm trying to think of the word, being able to understand the meaning of certain things that are specific to certain cultures, and that's what we are trained to do. Now, obviously, you can't be trained on every single culture, every single aspect of every single culture. And this is where personal bias can come into play. If you have, you know, that's why some people prefer a counselor or therapist that is the same race or ethnicity as them, because they feel a lot more comfortable with saying things. I had a client recently who would say things like, use slang like, somebody was bugging out, or they were wilding, or we turned up, whatever. And then she had stopped and said, you know, like, I'm so glad that I didn't have to explain what that meant to you. Like, because when she said it, I started laughing. And then I guess she had a realization, like, you know, she was just talking as if she was talking to a friend, you know, using that verbiage. And she didn't have to explain herself. It can be exhausting, you know, having to turn that on and off. And that's why a lot of people tend to prefer therapists that are of the same ethnicity or race.
Well, so another question I have is, in communities of color, I've noticed that I don't want nobody telling my business, right? You hear that a lot, right? So can you like give us a little bit of like the ethical um standard for like releasing information, or like how does that even work?
Right. So when you enter into the therapeutic relationship, there is confidentiality, and that's an ethical standard for us, which means that we are not allowed to share any personal business except for 3 instances. And this is if someone is hurting you, if you are hurting yourself, or if you are aware of someone, or if you're aware of someone being hurt. Those instances are the only times that we are allowed to share information, and it will be with either 1, someone who you've identified on your intake paperwork, or 2, law enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, in in COVID-19, right? How did the relationship transition from in person to teletherapy, if you dealt with that? And if and also, well, answer that first. I'm sorry.
So it was a quick transition for me personally. I hadn't, well, I guess at this point, this will clarify what I'm saying. I actually lost some relatives at the height of COVID. So that was the transition for me. So that's kind of one of those instances actually that you mentioned, where it was kind of like a dramatic shift, because this is like people I was raised by. So it wasn't a distant relative. It was an immediate impact. So I immediately had to stop all sessions. So that's kind of how I transitioned. And thank you, Olivia. That's kind of how I transitioned, or how my clients transitioned. And once I did that started to do that initial grief work, then I was able to reach back out and say, okay, I'm back and I'm doing virtual sessions. But for most clinicians, this is something, you know, that everyone was aware was happening. So it was a lot easier to make that transition. So when a clinician, I imagine, would have to say, you know, we can no longer meet in person, it was because you weren't allowed outside unless you were essential. Now, to be fair, I don't think I personally know anyone who continued to see people in person, but there was a brief period of time where it was a preference, and you didn't have to transition back. But it has been a lot of it has been a lot. You know, there are some people who are still not back to in-person sessions. Even I am. Again, that's a preference. You know, it depends on your client load, the type of clients that you have. Some of them really disconnect with virtual therapy. So
Yeah,
it's, you know, your safety is important for sure, but you know, you have to keep the client's best interest in mind as well.
of course. And so, you know, and it's these are more COVID specific questions because like this is the actual time that we live in. But I want to know like during this time, and especially if you were someone who were receiving services in person, and then it switched to the virtual therapy or teletherapy. Um, do the tools that you guys give, does the conversations transcend uh, in person or virtual therapy? Um, and I know like I've played a game in therapy one time, right? Not that I can't play a game at home, but it was a resource that was like immediately available that I kind of got to figure out like how to create that thing from home, and I'm sure it's possible, right? But does it transcend to a virtual realm easily? I guess is the question.
For some forms of therapy, it does. It translates a lot easier. So for instance, I do a lot of play therapy. That does not translate so well, especially with a 4 and 5 year old whose attention span is only about 3 minutes long. It is extremely difficult to do virtual therapy. But you know, we have to identify new resources and new ways to work with our clients. And that's just like teachers who went from being in person in the classroom and now they have to manage 25 kids on a virtual platform. For us in those type of positions, you know, it just forced us to be a little bit more creative. I don't want to say that you don't get the same thing, because you can. It just takes a little bit more work to ensure that your client is getting what they need virtually.
Okay. I think we're pretty much at all the questions that we received from our community. I got one more question for you, and then we're gonna start to wrap up. And but my last question is, as someone who is figuring out life therapy or whatever is going on in the world today, right? If we reach out to you, what's your obligation in that moment, right? Because my understanding is that therapists have some sort of obligation to help, right, or to serve, or whatever that means. So, like, if I call you right now, it was like, hey, I'm going through a lot. What's your obligation in that moment? I don't know exactly how this works. This is me just
No,
guessing.
yeah, that's more, and I haven't thought about this in a while, I guess. I think that's more of a moral obligation. Ethically, you are not our client. So for instance, if you have someone, I've had people reach out to me on Instagram saying I'm suicidal. I have no ethical obligation. Let me rephrase that. My ethical obligation in that instance is to, I can give you a crisis number. My ethical obligation is to say, go to the hospital, right? I don't have any obligation to talk about why you're suicidal, talk about where you, anything like that. Because once I engage with you in that way, then you do become my responsibility. So if I engage with you that way and we start to talk about, you know, you're on the bridge, or well, how did you get there? And then you know, you decide to end your life in that moment, you have become my responsibility because I decided to engage with you. So the immediate response is the safest response is go to the hospital. If someone is not in crisis, so just like, you know, you get a Psychology Today referral or something like that, and you don't have any appointments available, you don't necessarily have to respond to them, but that's why I say it's more of a moral thing at that point to say, well, thank you for reaching out, but unfortunately I don't have any availability. And you don't even have an obligation to give them a referral if you don't want to, because, you know, it's just an initial contact.
Yeah. So one, I just want to thank WeHelp NOLA for being a part of this conversation, and also for bringing Halima on to also be a part of this conversation. And then I want Halima as well to also, I want to thank you personally for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for providing as much as a wealth of information as you have brought to us. And then I just want to say, from Making Connections NOLA, that you guys are why we do this work as well, right? Because a lot of people think that we do this work specifically for our community and the people that come with us, but there are a bunch of communities that's doing this work as well. And we do this to be a part of it, right? To continue to push the message and the conversation around mental health, and the mental health and well-being of our people. So thank you so much. I do want to bring Kalila on for 1 second, just if there's anything else that she needs to say or bring on. That's the executive director of Making Connections New Orleans. So if you do have anything else to add and to say, please do in this moment.
No, I wanted to say thank you as well for spending.
Cool. Since she said no, nah, I'm kidding. I'm messing with her. I was just messing with her.
I'm gonna need therapy to deal with him. So when are you free is the real question. So I just want to say thank you for spending your Monday evening with us, and with our virtual community. I did have one last question, and I don't want to belabor it if it's too much because it's a heavy question. But I'm just wondering, how do therapists in this moment respond to people who may be dealing with more macro level concerns and issues? I mean, we're in a time where we are experiencing trauma on various levels. I know for me personally, I spent a month in Louisville, Kentucky, in the middle of Breonna Taylor protests and the things that I saw and experienced. And I'm just wondering, have you had that experience over the last few months, or even in the past, with people, primarily Black people, having to process and deal with racism, or being able to articulate that and then seek therapy around that, and what's your experience been in that, and then how do you, because it's not like, oh, this is a trigger for me, so I'm gonna stop doing this thing. I can't stop being Black in America, or I can't stop going to work. So how do you, in therapy, how do you address those kind of situations?
Mm-hmm. So I will definitely say there has been an increase in referrals at this time, because people, you know, one, they have these issues that they have either decided to put aside or they felt like they were doing okay with. And then these macro level issues kind of trigger those other issues. So now, like you said, they have all of these levels of trauma at play. And I think the question is more so, how do I, as someone who is likely experiencing those same things, engage with my clients? It is definitely a balancing act. And what And the way that you're asking is very similar to any other issue. And what I mean by that is if I'll be transparent. I'm currently dealing with grief, as I mentioned. I have stopped seeing all clients who reason for referral is grief. And that's an ethical responsibility that I have. So on that macro level, if I feel like, I am being impacted by all of these things and it is clouding my judgment about, or clouding my professional opinion, then I need to remove myself from the situation. And while I haven't been in the space, I haven't felt the need to have to do that, it then becomes a balancing act. So keeping these things separate, and that also goes back to counselors having their own counselor. So it does a lot for me to push my my personal opinions and my personal feelings aside and hear more about how my client is experiencing all the racial injustice and all of the other things that are happening. So I then have to take all of that and deal with that in my own therapy sessions is what should happen. If at any point a clinician was to feel like overwhelmed, which is very easy to do right now. And at the end of the day, therapists and counselors are still human. And to be quite honest, grief was the main reason I hadn't started sessions up again. But grief on top of all the issues, the macro level issues that were going on, I knew that I just couldn't do it, and I think that is an ethical obligation that we have to be able to know when to draw the line. Because if I'm sitting in session and there's one thing to validate someone's feelings and to say, you know what, I completely agree with that, or hey, I even experienced that. But if I'm sitting in a session and I'm going, yeah, girl, because I can't deal with this. I have crossed the line at that point, right? So if I feel like I'm at that point, then I should remove myself. And that will be the same, if you have a clinician who doesn't identify as African American or cannot identify with the injustices that are happening. At any point, if they start to feel like, oh, I'm tired of hearing about this, they need to remove themselves from that relationship. So, I hope I answered that question. But yeah, that would be my response.
So, and, I got another question. Sorry.
Y'all gonna have me here all night.
I know. Since we have you here. But nah, this is more specifically, this is to you and Olivia, and because we have this opportunity, I want to make sure that I ask, what does self-care even look like to you? And that's to both of you guys. And how do you make sure that you I need to make sure I give myself that self-care. I make sure I give myself that whatever, especially as someone who puts on that cape or puts on the weight of other people and the concerns and the issues that other people may be going through. So what does self-care even look like to you? And what are some of those tools that you use for self-care? Last question, I promise.
Well, for me, self-care is that degree of separation. So, I have the tendency to bring a lot of things home with me just because of the type of person that I am. I'm very empathic, and, some of the working with children, some of the things that you hear, you just can't leave them in the room. It's very difficult to do that. It takes a lot of work to do that consistently. So I think for me, it's constantly reminding myself to create that separation. And self-care has become very like commercialized, or I'm trying to think of the right word. Just, take a bubble bath and you'll feel better. Go shopping and you'll feel better.
Marketing.
Yes,
Right.
Yes, exactly. But self-care boils down to small actions that you take on a daily basis. Saying no, setting boundaries, creating a time for yourself where you do something that fills your cup up, as opposed to, and what I mean by that is, something that makes you feel good, especially if you're someone who wears that cape and who takes on the burdens of other people. You have to be able to know when you need a minute, when you need time for yourself. So that's been really important for me, and not feeling guilty when you do that.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
think Halima said it beautifully. For me, when I really think about self-care for myself, it's boundaries, which is something that I struggled with for a majority of my life, was setting those boundaries for myself and knowing what I need and how to enforce that for myself and not feel guilty about it, right? Not feel bad about those things. Self-care isn't just like, I'm going to eat a brownie and take a bubble bath. A lot of the times I think, which is branded and marketed incorrectly, is self-care can be difficult. Self-care isn't always easy. It doesn't always feel good. It can oftentimes be hard. Making those choices of what's going to impact you positively is not always easy. And for me, setting boundaries was one of those things that isn't easy for me, that is difficult. Like Halima said, getting those late night emails from people in crisis or who are in need, I'm going to want to help them as much as I can right in that moment. And so, and I'm always going to do that, but making sure for myself to take the time for myself, set those boundaries, put the work stuff on a separate time, plan my own time, and make sure that I'm really focusing in not just on what immediately will, make me feel good, which is important. Like, eat that brownie, take that bubble bath, by all means, God, yes, girl, do it. But also do the work for the more difficult things that might not feel good or be as easy right away, but that are going to impact your life, and your health and your wellness positively. And so boundaries is a big one of them. And there's a whole plethora of health and wellness. Exercise is a big thing for me that I it's a struggle every day to do it, but I will, because I know that impacts me personally, my mental health, really positively. So, doing yoga with Magnolia Yoga, going to some dancing class at Dancing Grounds, like those are things, and those are more fun ways to do it. But therapy is another example. It's not always easy. It can be difficult. It can be a hard thing to get through. And especially when you're in that nitty gritty of really deep, seated trauma, or going through relationships or anything else, that can be hard, but you're actively working through it, and it's going to be positive for you in the long run. So I think that's also always important to remember with self-care. It's not always super simple or easy, but remember why you're doing it and what it's going to mean for you in the long run.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of it with us. And also thank you for the partnership and the ability to continue to grow this partnership into what we hopefully see fit forward. So again, thank you, Halima. Thank you, Olivia. Thank WeHelp NOLA. Thank you for Kalala for staying on the entire time. And thank you, everybody that watched this on Facebook or watched this and jumped in the Zoom call. Everyone's appreciated. We love y'all. Thank y'all so much. And we're wrapping up. So any last words? Anybody have anything else to say before we get off this call?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Y'all enjoy the rest of your nights and the rest of your weeks. We will talk to y'all soon.
All right, bye.
Thanks,
Bye. Take care.
have a good one.
Bye.